All right, we are back. Time for the news. And the first real big thing that came out this past week was drug testing in esports. So ESL is going to start at some point in the near future drug testing esports players. There are many issues brought up by this, but the main thing to me is that it seems like it's a reactionary move to Semphis, who's a former Cloud9 player, basically saying that the whole team was on Adderall for matches back in the day. I guess what would have been a year ago, 2 years ago, when he was on Cloud9. But I just want to get your guys' thoughts. I had an ESL guy respond to me on Twitter several times, basically, because the reason that this works in real sports is that there's a whole lot of discussion that goes on between players and there's player unions and things that help create these rules.
I also think works in real sports is a real questionable definition.
No, yeah, that's what I mean is is like to me what say, and the guy from ESL assured me, James Lampkin, I believe is his name. He's a programming producer for them. I don't know why he was tweeting in response to me that you would think ESL would be like, yo, let us release shit on official channels. But,
yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know that this is something that you can just put out there and then say you're going to test for ESL Cologne, which is in like 3 weeks. Like,
yeah. Will there actually be testing? That's the real question. Like, isn't it very expensive to actually do these tests?
All right,
like,
so that's the main thing for me is what are you going to test for? Because that hasn't been put out there.
Yeah.
Obviously Adderall is one thing. Although the guy responded to me again, and he said we're not just going to test for Adderall. It's going to be testing for other stuff. Because I actually, the first tweet he responded to me about, I was like, so the UFC, this has been a big thing with them. Dudes are getting popped for steroids left and right in MMA recently because they just stepped up testing. Each test for each fighter costs $50,000 to do.
Yeah.
And there's like a chain of custody that has to be, airtight, so there's no, fake urine or any other thing that could happen. And like what? I mean, can ESL afford to? That means one team. If you test all of Cloud9 right now, that's $250K if you're doing some full board test like that. But we don't know what they're going to do. But the fact is, it's got to be in the thousands per player.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not cheap to do.
I mean, I don't know. You get drug tested all the time for like a new job or something. I don't think. I have a feeling that the rigor around like UFC drug testing in particular.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
They're probably looking for everything.
Yeah, obviously.
But I'm sure it's not like, especially if you're talking about a process for doing that at every event, you can probably get the cost down. But I think what seems more likely is just the threat that they'll do it. And the fact that maybe they'll do it randomly. They might not do it to everyone, but they'll do it randomly. And so are you really going to risk you being the one that gets tested that event? And like that's probably good enough to get people not to even test
to get most people not to,
like the reason people would do it is because they know there's no chance they get caught. If there's even a very slight chance they would get caught, they're not going to do it. Like it's not worth risking your career over.
So the big problem to me, though, is them saying we're going to do this in 3 weeks. Even if you're only randomly testing a couple players, like, how are you putting together all this stuff with these dudes at tournaments every weekend? And they assured me, by they, I mean ESL dude on Twitter, who, yes, is actually from ESL. If people are like, yo, it's just some fake account. No, he's actually from ESL. He's like, of course we're going to talk to all the organizations and players, and I'm like, so you're gonna do this all in 3 weeks?
It is a lot to. I forgot that. That's why I don't.
Even
think
if
the
you
actual
randomly test
happen.
3 dudes for ESL Cologne out of every team that's gonna be there, you can't say to these players, because it sounds like it might sound like a cop out, but you have to give them a little bit if they are using something that they don't even know what if they're using something that could be illegal.
Well, not to mention when you get into the actual prescriptions for Adderall that people may have from their doctors, that could be totally legitimate, because the other thing in all the articles is like you said, the list of what they're actually, the full list of what they're testing for and what is technically illegal, and then how to deal with if someone has a prescription, he's on Adderall, but he's, it's an adequate use of Adderall because he has this ADHD or whatever. Like, I don't know. There's just so many. I totally agree with you in the sense of I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, and the discussion was bound to happen at some point regardless. Semphis just pushed it forward with his comments, and they kind of had to address it. I mean, honestly, if Semphis hadn't said anything, no one would
to address it, but that's
well,
fine.
maybe not. But they wouldn't have given. I mean, the truth is, if Semphis hadn't said this, somebody else would have said it at some point. But if Semphis hadn't said it at this point, they wouldn't have done anything, because they don't really want to deal with it, and also they don't want their players at their big events getting tested and busted. I mean, in the sense that it is their players, because these big star players on these big teams and stuff on like Cloud9 and all that kind of stuff, these are what help attract people to watch it. No one wants, I'm sure ESL doesn't want to be busting people in general. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying they don't care about the integrity of the game, but there's just so much more behind it than just being like, yeah, we only care about the integrity of the game, which I think is important, and I think that's a factor. But that's a lot to get done, and especially with no players unions or anything like that going on in esports really right now. And there's just so many questions,
and there's a lot of
really hard.
There's a lot of like jokes out there too about like Freakazoid and Pasha, who are huge freaking dudes, and it's like, are you gonna what if they did do roids just because they bodybuild? Like, sure. What then? What does that have to do with because actually, if you didn't know, you can get a prescription for steroids or get steroids, and it's totally cool unless you're playing like professional sports. Like, it's not actually illegal. There's nothing illegal about it. It's a rule for sports. But are you gonna pop him for that? Like, does that help him? I mean, his performance today would indicate otherwise if it does. But you can't do this in 3 weeks. You cannot do this in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's a lot to get
Maybe
done.
Next year. Maybe by next year you put together drug testing program.
I stand in solidarity with Juicy J's stand on this. Fuck a PO, fuck a piss test. Been getting trippy since I was born, and I ain't dead yet. So that's where I lie on this topic.
It's wise words by him.
I
don't know.
I don't think this gives any more legitimacy to esports, which is what a lot of articles are saying. I'm like, it's legitimate anyway. I don't think
it is legitimate anyway, and I do think it's a joke. Like, a lot of people in the comments and stuff, there's actually a lot of going in both those articles, Dan. I was just scrolling the comments, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. But some of the talk of like trying to make this like, well, if this is going to be a real sport, they need to be doing. It's like, dude, fucking real sport. Like, let's talk about baseball and fucking steroids and drug tests. Like, let's be real. Come on.
The tour to steroids.
Yeah,
that's all Tour de France is.
I think they do have to address it, right? If you consider yourself like the leader in the competitive space, you have to address it, because it's going to be the elephant in the room if you don't.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, like, how do you implement it realistically on such a short timeline for an upcoming event? No idea. I mean,
you don't.
Like, well, it's possible that it's just basically like, checking boxes, right? No one gets caught because they don't actually have protocols in place yet or whatever, but they say they did it, and it makes it look good. I mean, a lot of this is just like
partnering with the World Anti-Doping Agency. Like, that's the authority. So they're serious about it. It's just like, WADA protocols for other things have been in place for years and years, and they took years and years to get there.
I mean, it's entirely possible. Like, I know nothing about how this stuff works in professional sports in terms of like the administration of it, but it's possible that if they're partnering with an agency that already handles a lot of this stuff, that you just you accept whatever cost is associated with it, and then they just come to the event and they take care of it and they sign off on it. Yeah. It may be plug and play. I have no idea.
Well, I think we should really look at maybe the most effective a big organization that deals with anti-drug. I think we should, whatever the cycling guys are doing, we need to figure out, because that's an effective program. I mean, You know, Lance
It
Armstrong.
was like it's not even Lance Armstrong. It was something like at one point I think last year it was like the last 4 Tour de France winners tested positive or something like that.
Exactly. Like anybody that wants to compete.
Basically, if you want to win the Tour de France, you got to be on some shit. Is what I'm
exactly.
saying.
Yeah. Which shouldn't have shocked anybody anyway, because you're like, the human body shouldn't be able to do that. Like, they need to be doing something. You know what I
think the way you get around the drug testing is you make all professional players become dare officers as well.
Maybe they'll take it more seriously.
So,
yeah.
We do know too. We know weed is on this list of stuff they're going to test for, which I find hilarious.
That's really funny.
I mean, if you want to kill yourself, if you want to overdose on dangerous drugs, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, that's another thing of what applies to esports as a prohibited or a performance enhancing drug.
Yeah.
Like I think that's an interesting question, but like the safest answer is just everything that's banned in like other sports.
I think that's all.
That's the safest answer, but I don't think that applies whatsoever in a lot of cases.
The thing is that like these are if we want to look at these people as professional athletes, like why don't you just conform to the same standards that regular athletes conform to, and then eventually esports is on the same stage in in this specific way as real sports, even though they're different, right? But I'm sure Adderall is banned in pro sports, probably.
I don't know, actually.
I don't know.
That's a good question.
Even though like there's probably
maybe I could see it. I could see it giving an advantage to somebody.
Yeah. I mean, like, steroids probably aren't going to give you an advantage in Counter-Strike or League of Legends or something, but like, fine, ban it anyway.
See, that's to me as well, which was another thing I brought up when I was talking to that ESL dude. I was like, well, I can definitely see this for we are also looking at the safety of our players, because I mean, if you look at like, for instance, the 80s, in baseball in the 80s, like, tons of dudes died because there was no testing, so they just did whatever the fuck they wanted. Whether it was tons and tons of steroids, like shit they didn't even know what they were putting in them. Cocaine was the big thing, but they didn't test for any of it. There was no policy. You just do whatever you wanted. And that's basically what it is in esports right now. I'm not, before someone jumps to conclusions, I'm not saying everyone who plays CSGO is on fucking cocaine, but like they can do.
It's a safe assumption.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean,
they can. What I'm saying is they can do whatever they want right now because they're just regular people under that sort of law. Like, if it's not illegal, they can do it, and it's totally fine.
I think it's not unreasonable that you just have them. You test them for THC and for cocaine and for Adderall and like whatever normal athletes get tested for, because if we consider these people athletes, then just don't do drugs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's just, to me it seems like it's not that big of a deal either way. Like, just don't do them. You are, if you consider yourself a professional athlete, then expect to eventually be upheld to the same standards as as sports athletes.
Yep. As the money gets bigger, this stuff will keep cropping up. So it would have eventually happened even if Semphis had said something.
Yeah.
It seems like a good thing.
Yeah, I think for player safety at this point, that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, I actually, just to cap that off, I actually think that the player safety thing is a pretty legitimate argument for why this should happen anyway, like regardless of scandal or whatever, because a lot of esports players are younger, like even younger than 18 sometimes. So these guidelines seem especially pertinent to just help keep young kids safe from bad stuff.
Yeah, I see that. All right.